The creation of life is often romanticized, but in the animal kingdom, mating and reproduction is ruthless, violent, and a lethal biological warfare. Bedbug. In the dark crevices of human bedrooms, reproduction is not a biological imperative. It is a violent structural breach. The female possesses no traditional reproductive tract. Instead, the male initiates an act of anatomical forced entry. He does not mate with her, he stabs her. Using a weaponized, needle-like appendage, he violently punctures her abdominal wall, flooding her open body cavity with his genetic payload. To survive this trauma without instantly dying from bacterial sepsis, she must deploy a localized immune containment zone. But the true nightmare belongs to the sperm. It must actively swim through her circulatory fluids, surviving a hostile, toxic chemical environment just to locate the ovaries. The physical toll of this invasion permanently shortens her lifespan. Deep-sea anglerfish. In the crushing isolation of the midnight zone, a male faces a terrifying absolute. If he actually finds a female in the pitch-black abyss, he can never let her go. If they drift apart, they will die alone. To prevent this, he executes a biological lockdown so extreme it erases his own existence. He permanently anchors his jaws into her flesh. But this is not an attack. It is the deployment of a flesh-melting chemical agent. Upon biting down, he releases enzymes that systematically dissolve their skin. Their blood vessels knit together. Their circulatory systems physically fuse. The moment their bloodstreams merge, his anatomy initiates a forced shutdown. His digestive tract atrophies. His fins disintegrate. His eyes go blind. He devolves into a permanent biological USB drive, hardwired directly into the female. She assumes total metabolic control over his rotting remnants, turning into a living chimera that can host up to 8 parasitic males at once. The deep sea requires biological surrender. But coming up, a female that weaponizes her internal organs to trap unwanted mates, and a predator that requires decapitation to achieve peak performance. But first, we return to the lethal surface. The redback spider. In the Australian outback, reproduction for this 3mm male is a meticulously calculated suicide mission. He is completely dwarfed by a female armed with neurotoxins potent enough to collapse a vertebrate's nervous system. By approaching her web, he is walking into the strike zone of a hypercarnivore that views him entirely as a calorie source. If he attempts a standard approach, he will be killed before fertilization finishes. To guarantee his genetic legacy, he executes a mechanical maneuver that forces his own brutal execution. As copulation begins, he performs a fatal, tactical backflip. He deliberately somersaults over the female's head, violently jamming his own abdomen directly into her fangs. This self-sacrifice is a masterpiece of dark evolutionary economics. By forcing her to digest him alive, he physically satiates her, drastically reducing the chance she will mate with rivals. Because she is occupied chewing through his vital organs, he remains attached 50% longer, maximizing his genetic payload. He is an aggressive investor, willingly burning his entire net worth to extend a high-stakes advertisement by a few critical seconds. Antechinus. Broad-footed marsupial mice. Every August, the entire adult male population of this small Australian predator undergoes a synchronized, inescapable biological collapse. Operating on a permanent metabolic overdrive, his biology initiates a singular, fatal explosion. He completely abandons sleep and food, engaging in frenzied, uninterrupted mating sessions lasting up to 14 consecutive hours. Generating the kinetic energy for this impossible physical exertion requires a systemic override. His brain floods his bloodstream with a chemical cocktail so toxic it actively dismantles him from the inside out. Cortisol levels skyrocket to a lethal concentration that would instantly kill most mammals. This stress hormone forces his body to divert every single calorie to the reproductive organs, entirely deactivating his immune system. The male undergoes total systemic disintegration while still alive and actively hunting for mates. With 0 white blood cells left, minor scratches mutate into rotting gangrene. Internal bleeding liquefies his organs. His fur falls out in clumps as his cellular structure degrades. It is the biological equivalent of a driver ripping out a vehicle's entire cooling system just to win a single drag race, knowing the engine will melt into slag at the finish line. Within weeks, the male mortality rate hits exactly 100%. Carpet flatworm. Beneath the tranquil surface of tropical reefs, a tiny marine predator engages in a violent duel where the ultimate penalty for losing is the extreme physical burden of motherhood. This organism is entirely hermaphroditic. Producing eggs demands a massive, exhausting expenditure of energy, while producing sperm is biologically cheap. To avoid the grueling physiological cost of carrying offspring, 2 individuals will actively fight to violently force the maternal role onto the other. This is not a ritualistic mating dance. It is a literal stabbing match. Both combatants are armed with dual, needle-sharp reproductive organs that function exactly like biological daggers. They do not aim for a reproductive tract, because they simply do not need one. The victor strikes the opponent anywhere on the body, physically punching the dagger through the flesh. Once injected, the sperm acts as a hostile, invasive agent. It literally burns its way through the loser's skin, actively migrating through internal tissue to locate and fertilize the eggs. It is a brutal fencing match where the decisive strike acts as a weaponized dart, leaving the victim trapped with a severe, inescapable metabolic curse. Mallard duck. The idyllic image of ducks paddling across a pond masks one of the most anatomically violent evolutionary arms races on Earth. Females face a constant, severe threat of forced copulation from aggressive rival males. Unable to fight them off with sheer physical force, she has instead weaponized her own internal organs. This conflict has escalated into a mechanical trench war of staggering structural complexity. To breach her defenses, the male developed a highly specialized 20-centimeter corkscrew-shaped organ. Driven by explosive lymphatic pressure, he can violently deploy it in less than half a second. But the female's internal architecture actively fights back. Her reproductive tract is a hostile labyrinth of physical countermeasures. It features sharp reverse spirals and biological dead ends engineered specifically to snag the male's organ and block unwanted sperm. If she is courted by a preferred partner, however, she voluntarily relaxes these muscles to dismantle the traps. Consequently, 97% of successful fertilizations come strictly from chosen mates. It is a master lockpick attempting to breach a high-security vault that actively and intelligently reshapes its own internal tumblers. Praying mantis. In the predatory hierarchy of insects, ambush hunters rely on absolute stealth and sudden, devastating strikes. But for the male of this species, the ultimate evolutionary victory requires his own decapitation. The female is a significantly larger, notorious cannibal. When a male mounts her to initiate copulation, he is fighting his own biology. A specific nerve center in his head actively inhibits his mating movements, keeping his physical reactions sluggish and restrained. To maximize his reproductive output, he requires a catastrophic removal of his own neural kill switch. The female turns and literally bites his head off, but this decapitation does not stop the copulation. It aggressively accelerates it. With the inhibitory nerve center destroyed, the male's autonomous abdominal nerves take full control of the host. His headless, bleeding body continues the rhythmic mating process for hours, moving with violently more force than it ever could while intact. Furthermore, consuming his brain provides the female with a massive influx of essential amino acids, increasing her final egg clutch size by 20%. Elephant seal. On the frozen, crowded breeding beaches of the subantarctic, reproductive success is dictated entirely by brutal, crushing mass. A A dominant alpha male, the beachmaster, weighs up to 3,500 kilograms, fiercely controlling a harem of 50 females. This absolute monopoly requires constant, bloody defense against rival challengers. The physical disparity on the beach is terrifying. A bull is 10 times the size of a female and 100 times the mass of a newborn pup. When a rival approaches, the beachmaster does not navigate carefully. He moves in a blind, straight line, driven by pure evolutionary rage. In his rush to slaughter the challenger, the alpha male drags his 3-ton body directly over the harem, frequently crushing his own offspring to death under his weight. This collateral infanticide is a cold, calculated evolutionary write-off. Less than 1% of all males in a colony will father nearly 90% of the next generation. The mathematical pressure to maintain dominance is so extreme that the survival of an individual pup is entirely irrelevant compared to the necessity of holding the territory. If he loses his rank, his bloodline ends. He operates like a heavy armored tank driving straight through a village to hoist a flag, permanently obliterating the very infrastructure it was supposed to protect.